There we go. We are now live. Are we live?
Have we
It
arrived
still
live?
says preparing. Oh, it's directing. There we go.
Meeting is
We
now
are
streaming
live on
live on
Facebook.
Facebook.
Woo! We did it. So welcome everyone. Welcome to our inspirational interview with Katie Flanagan. So Katie is actually a very old friend of mine. We worked together in our boarding school adventure days. And so it's a real honor and pleasure to have you on, Katie. So before I start and introduce Katie, I just want to invite all of you who are watching today to chime in. If you have questions or comments, I'll be able to see them, and really excited to have your input into our interview today. So I was really excited to talk with Katie because she has been influenced a lot in her journey through in her entrepreneurial journey and personal journey by yoga and Ayurveda. So I thought it would be really fun just to have a conversation that I don't know that we've ever actually really had,
I don't think so.
but have it publicly so other people can see. So let me introduce you. So Katie is an entrepreneur. She owns a very successful juice business and more. She does more than juice, which you'll probably hear about later, in Brevard, North Carolina. And she also is a yoga teacher and is a graduate of my program, the Vitality Circle, and has had many adventures in the world. One of the most recent being traveling to India, which deepened her connection with yoga and Ayurveda. So I'm really excited to introduce to you Katie Flanagan. Yay!
Hey everyone, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Hannah.
Yay.
I get a
Yeah.
little teary,
So
like thinking about how long we've known each other.
I know. It's been a while. Katie was actually just complimenting me on my technology skills because they have come a long way since the days that we were working together. Okay, so let's start out by just having you share a little bit about how you got started on the juicing journey. Like, how did that come into your life?
So I guess my business turned 6 years old this summer, and so just in preparation for this interview, thinking back, I've always been a really active person. I've always lived a healthy lifestyle. Growing up, we were vegetarians for a long time, ate really healthy, but I've always been a larger human being and ebbed and flowed in how I felt in this body. And I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, when we were working at the Outdoor Academy, living a healthy lifestyle, backpacking, being outside, but just still feeling like swollen in my body, like kind of puffy, and had an opportunity in my life to kind of step away from everything that I was doing. And as part of that was making my own juice a lot, just because I was like, well, juice, that's what we do. So started making juice for myself and for my family. And that was in the fall of, I guess, 2013. And as I started drinking it, I just started having more energy. I just immediately started feeling a little fresher, a little lighter in my body. It was in the summertime. I was having better bowel movements, all that. And so had some family things going on through that fall and into the early next year, and it fell into a really deep slump. And a friend reached out to me and said, can I make some juice for you? And so she did. And that sort of pulled me up from the depths, just like that simple act of having something fresh, nourishing made for me. And that was in January. And from that day forward, literally, I just started making my own like gallons of juice once a week. This is not ideal. Don't do what I did. I'll talk more about that. Ignore that. But I would make a gallon of juice on Sunday, and I would just spread it out throughout the days, and friends would taste it and say, I don't know what that weird green thing is that you're drinking, but it tastes delicious. And from the very beginning, I've always thought that just because it's healthy and good for you doesn't mean it has to taste like crap. That you can find that sort of alchemy in between with food and juice. So that was in February, and literally was making juice, putting it in a cooler outside of my fence. Friends would pick it up. And by June, I had incorporated. So for me, it wasn't the whole picture. It wasn't like this magic bullet that fixed everything, but it was like a little bit of a kickstart, a little bit of an impetus that every day kind of kept me on track.
Yeah.
And so in June of 2016, Green Heart Juice was born.
Yay.
No, 2014.
2014. Wow. Yeah, that's great. And so you started out with juice, and then from my perspective, it looks like yoga and Ayurveda played a role in how your business has developed since then. Would you say that's your story too?
I think so, absolutely. Well, and like the beautiful thing about Ayurveda is that it ties in so much to just like seasonality and sort of like the times. And I won't dive down that rabbit hole too much, but it just makes sense once you start to learn about it. So I was doing the juice at first, and then the bone broth came in because, you know, warming, nourishing stuff in the cooler months. And then over time, based on what I was learning and what I was feeling in my body and what my body needed and what my customers were asking for, and someone's going to ask for what they feel like they need on a deep level, whether they know like the reason behind it. And so I kind of just let all of those guide the way, and then ended up doing a coconut milk based dairy free yogurt, ghee. We do ghee now. And then I always have a seasonal beverage that is on board. So like wintertime, we have a citrus and pomegranate juice. This time of year, we do a watermelon. In the cooler months, I have a ginger, turmeric, lemon juice. So juice is awesome, even all throughout the year in different ways, but it's mostly awesome in the warmer months. So just kind of trying to find ways to fit the needs of nourishing with ease. That's our tagline for folks throughout all the seasons.
Yeah. It's awesome that's an aware. I think cool. I think a lot of people, that are juicers are just juice all the time, but there's not an awareness of like actually drinking like cold, certain types of juice in the cold weather isn't necessarily always the best.
Totally.
And that is such a great part of your business too, because you're educating people about the seasonality. Yeah.
And it's a little bit like code shifting sometimes. I'm giving away all my secrets. But like I have some clients that just want to drink a green juice all year long. And I have to kind of say, okay, drink your juice all year long, but maybe in the winter we'll drink the beet juice and the carrot juice, and then the summertime, you know. So even if they're sort of hardcore juicers, I try to kind of convince them to work with the times that they're living in.
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you say that yoga and Ayurveda have influenced your path as an entrepreneur?
I think so. That's a really big question. Yeah. I was like thinking about it. I was like,
probably many facets
about that. So to me, yoga and Ayurveda at this point are just, I mean, they all go into one. You know, when you're talking about the seasonality of what you're putting in your body on the Ayurveda standpoint, and then the seasonality of how you're practicing. But for me, a big piece of it is like meeting myself where I'm at. So as an entrepreneur, I think we can get really sucked into like the hustle mindset. Like there's a lot on Instagram and social media of like hustle. And I'm like kind of done with the hustle. You know, I think there are times for hustling, but like I don't want to land in the hustle for the rest of my life. So for me with Ayurveda, that means, you know, summertime, spring and summer are going to be more active. There's going to be more business. And I just land into that. I try not to resist against it, if that makes sense. Because I know in the wintertime, it's going to be a slower, more calm time. And so in the winter, when sales are lower, or when maybe there's not as much activity, I'm like, this is great. My body can rest. Like my business is hard on my body, both of my businesses. And so number one, it's kind of like a trusting piece. I think with the Ayurveda and the yoga is like, so long as I keep doing my work, I'm feeding myself as a daily or as a weekly or as a seasonally, and I'm practicing that way. If I keep that kind of foundation built, then I can like trust a little bit more into the slower seasons and into the faster seasons. Is that kind of landing in your question? Okay.
Yeah. That's great.
So I think it's just kind of like, it's a wave. It's just like, or it's a spirally wave, and not trying to force my way out of it. I think like Ayurveda and yoga have really taught me to lean into like the path of least resistance. and like the trust that has to be in there.
Yeah. Awesome. That's so great. Yeah. And then of course your product line has been influenced like
Yes, absolutely.
by,
I get so excited about what we're talking about.
yeah.
So the products very much so have been influenced by Ayurveda. I would say, you know, talking about the broths and the ghee and the dairy-free yogurt having like some good fat in there. And also what I'm like willing to offer out to the world. I think you were just touching on about how some juice companies or some juicers are just like green juice all year long, go, go, go. And I've had to kind of like hold the hand and educate of my clients without being like too weird and out there. Are you what? And just learning how to like offer the options to them, and then also like convince them that like just give this a try. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. You're helping guide them. And then
Yes.
they're like, oh, I feel great. Thanks, Katie.
Right. And it's like, you know, I think all of the folks that maybe are watching or have been in the vitality circle or are thinking about being in the vitality circle, a lot of the things can feel really hard or like far off in the distance, or like intangible in a way. Like I could never do that because fill in the blank. But it's just like little tidbits at a time, like little nibbles. And then you kind of start to realize like, oh, I ate my dinner, you know, 6 o'clock. Like I'm like things start to kind of like build and trickle and ripple from there. And that's what it's like, I feel like, as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of follow the lead of the next,
Mm-hmm.
the next thing.
Yeah.
So you took a recent trip to India. So will you talk a little bit about how that brought insight to your path or deepened your practice?
Absolutely. So I went to India. I think I went with my yoga teacher, and a group of about 11 women. And I didn't go there with any expectation. I've traveled quite a bit in my life to developing countries. So I knew to not go in with like any sort of expectation, and yet we're all still human. And so I found myself questioning a lot of things, like mostly out of like curiosity, like, oh, why do they decorate that thing on the wall? Or, oh, what is this? Like a lot of like external inquiry, if you will. So one of the biggest things I think that I took back with me was just the idea of svadhyaya, self-inquiry, of not necessarily like, because there's trash everywhere. And to us as Westerners, it's like, well, get a trash can and pick up the trash. Like that's the really easy answer inside of our heads. And in talking with my teacher and with a lot of sitting, I sort of switched it to like a self-inquiry of like, well, why does that? And it's a little bit of a game that I'm kind of playing with myself, but why does that trash bother me so much? Why do I need to know what the meaning of this? Like, why do I need to know all of this concrete information? Like, it's just going to fill my ego and like make me feel better momentarily. And so the idea of kind of reflecting things back inward, not in like a judgmental or a shameful way, but like, why does this trash on the ground make me feel uneasy? So I've kind of brought the idea back of like internal reflection, because the world is just like coming at you there, you know, coming at you nonstop. And just having that space and time to go to the temples, to go to these places and like feel all of the sensations and then like internalize those. So that was the one big thing I think I took home. The other concept is the idea of devotion. And this goes a little bit more into the yoga world. And I've always struggled with devotion. I grew up sort of in organized religion worlds, but never really saw, in my mind, from my perspective, like a true devotion. And I just didn't know how to do, like, how are you devoted to waking up every morning and practicing yoga? How are you devoted to like just the how do people find that willpower or whatever you want to call to be devoted to anything? And one thing was, I was like, I realized there, oh wait, I need to be devoted to myself first and foremost, and out of that grows boundaries and all kinds of other cool things. But in India, you dress for temple, so you dress in like your full costume, you dress as though you're going to see the gods, and how do you want to be presented? And I found when I was going there, because I knew a little bit about Ganesha and all these different deities, you know, a little bit here and there, enough to get in trouble. And then all of a sudden I'm like seeing them, and so I feel like I have this relationship with them, and I'm like, okay, what you got for me? Like, okay, Ganesha, what are you going to get out of my way? Like, okay, what are you guys going to do for me? and not like trying to be selfish or like I was taking, but that's just was like my well, I traveled
Mm.
all this way. And what I realized is it's a very much so a give and take. Like I have to bring something to the table. Like I have to show up in my rawest, truest, oh, I get chills thinking about it, like just the meest of me. I have to show up with all of my flaws, with all of my beauty, and give, and just like literally detach from all that, give up all of that, and then maybe some receiving happens. But even in that giving, like you're already this like open conduit to receive. And so remember this one specific moment walking into temple, and it was this deity that we'd been like building up to see over several days. And you get in there and it's like steamy and smoky and sweaty, and like you can't see anything, and people are like pushing, and of course I'm like, well, I want to see. And then there was this point where I was just like, I don't need to see. It's okay, I'm here, I'm like feeling the sensation. And this little boy who was sitting up on the railing above everyone turned around, and we just locked eyes. And for me, like that was the moment of the divine. Like he and I just like locked eyes for like 5 seconds. I saw him, he saw me. And that's when you go up to the deities, it's like, I see you, see me. I'm going on a tangent now, but just the idea that there is divinity in everything and in everyone. Walking down the streets, Indian women would see us and in Indian costume, and we would just lock eyes, and they would just give us this like look of approval, if you will. So that it does, I guess what I'm trying to say is that like devotion and divinity doesn't have to be this like one statue made out of gold that's covered in flowers. Like it's all of the little steps along the way, if you're open to that, and if I can let myself be in that space. So
Yeah. So what does that look like in terms of what has come back with you to
that's a great
life
question.
in North Carolina
Yeah.
and being an entrepreneur and teaching yoga to Westerners and
um 3 days later we're still talking.
right.
I discipline is a big piece of it for me. So a lot of it is like coming into quiet space, into stillness. Like I just, the lessons keep coming back to like, maybe it's our days and maybe it's our time that we're living in, maybe it's me as an individual, but stillness is what I'm keep being brought back to from that. And so when number one, when I like can go into stillness, I can kind of like embody those sensations and those feelings that I had when I was in the temples as like a reminder. But like I was saying, the holy or the divinity or whatever you want to call it is, I can make this into a holy, anything that I have, I can kind of like turn into something that has energy. Like so how this works in my day-to-day life is it looks like discipline. It looks like getting up, getting on my mat, sitting in stillness. I think stillness is the biggest thing. And then out of that has boundaries. I think boundaries are like directly tied into all of this for me. Coming back from India and then with the pandemic hitting, like I had to say no. There's a lot of no's, and like I need time to be in stillness. I need time to digest and to be with me. And I think that we move through transition really quickly in our lives. And if any of y'all are yoga practitioners out there, Shavasana is possibly the most important asana shape that you're going to go into practice, because it allows the body to assimilate and digest before you transition on to the next thing. And so when we like so quickly move from one thing to the next, it's almost like all of this work you just did kind of poofs away, and then you're not really fully prepared for the next thing, or I'm not fully prepared. So I think like honoring where I'm at on a day-to-day basis, like the devotion to myself and the honor and respect to myself. And I have good days and I have bad days. But I still show up back on my mat, or I still show up in a moment of mindfulness or awareness.
Yeah. So so right now you're teaching online yoga?
Teaching online and live. Yep.
Okay.
Like one live in-class person a week. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and what are you finding from yoga practice right now? Like what are you feeling like guiding people into these days, given the current state of the world and kind of where you are internally seeking more stillness?
Sure. So I joke my students, because my classes are labeled gentle yoga, which they absolutely are, but gentle doesn't always mean easy, right? Like we can move super slow and it be hard.
Yeah.
But right now I'm finding that my classes are really low to the ground.
Yeah.
A lot of twists. And even when I'm like, because I don't actually plan my classes, I kind of come into the space and see and feel what's going on and move from there. And I'm like, okay, today we're going to stand up and we're going to do like these standing poses, and then show up to class. And I just feel this energy of we need to stay slow and low. So yin shapes have been kind of sliding their way into my practice, into my teaching. I just think that as we're moving, we call it the after times, as we're moving into these after times and things are opening back up and we're moving out into the world. We'll backtrack. We had such an opportunity during quarantine to really like settle down and slow down, however that looks like for somebody.
Yeah.
Even people that were really busy, I think it was a time of introspection. And I think there was a lot to be gained from that. And so we really settled into that during that time. And then as we're like flinging the doors open, I talked about the idea of exit fever on backpacking trips. Like we're like in the exit fever time, you know, you just want to get back to normal life. And so in my classes, I'm asking my students to sit in stillness longer. Like there's always a pretty extended meditative piece. I just feel like I'm always trying to get everyone to slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Right now. And that's to say that like yesterday was really hot out. And so we did a super cooling practice, but then wanted to do some yin. So we heated it up a little bit and then dropped back down. But I'm just always being mindful of the dosha of the year that we're in when I'm teaching practice, pretty much first and foremost.
Yeah. Yeah. It is helpful, isn't it? To just be like, oh, summertime, shouldn't do lots and lots of heat building practices.
Yes.
Not very helpful. So I wanted to ask just a little bit more about the entrepreneurial path and bring that into like your own health journey, and like how has your relationship with juice changed perhaps, or how you see that like need for nourishment or healing in your continued life process now that I didn't realize Green Heart Juice is 6 years old. That's really
crazy.
exciting. Yeah,
it is. So I think what you're asking is kind of how like juice has evolved in my personal life.
Yeah, like what are you still seeing it as a big piece of your health protocol, or are you more like ghee and bone broth or
sure
like other things? Or
I'm also human. And so I think like the rest of the world during COVID, especially like the first 2 months, I was not nourishing myself well. I was not feeding myself well. I was eating and I was eating okay, but there was also like a lot of not great stuff in there. And so that's like kind of thrown my pH, I think, off a little bit. So I'm working back towards that. But what I find is when my body is not great right now, when I drink juice, like I'll get heartburn or it'll exasperate it a little bit. So I actually have not been drinking a lot of juice right now. I drink some of the things, like some of the cucumber lemon juice. It's so cooling and hydrating. And so I've been drinking that. But my diet is pretty simple right now. It's mostly plant-based, depending on the time of the month that I'm in. The juice comes into play in the summertime when I'm much more active and like moving around. And I just need those like electrolytes and the minerals in my body. But definitely like in the fall, I drink the turmeric, honey, lemon juices.
That's so good. I love that.
It's so good. The hot honey is so good. The power shots I drink, you know, so I do keep a little bit of turmeric on board because I've got some inflammation going on. But definitely in the wintertime, although I will say ghee for me is like a year round. I mean, that's obviously a year round thing. And I probably go a little overboard on it just because I can like just feel like how nourishing that stuff is when I eat it. And then in the wintertime, it's like broth, broth, broth. I will say in the summertime, I drink my immunity broth more. It's the mushroom and seaweed based one.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't get as much of the animal protein and fat, but I do drink I'll use the lighter broth in the summertime.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
And so I just want to put it out there to folks that are watching. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in. I haven't seen any come in yet, although we have folks watching. And how about ways in which folks can easily start juicing at home? What would you suggest?
Don't listen to the thing I said earlier. So typically if you're juicing at home, you've got a centrifugal juicer. It's the one with the kind of like funnel shaped blade that like that. So you've got a couple of different kinds. That's typically like under the $200 price range that people are going to buy. And then there's like the fancier masticating or like auger juicers. So two different kind of juices we're talking about here. I'm going to mostly focus on what I think most people are going to have. And if you have like a fancier juicer and you want to reach out to me directly, please do. But if you're making juice at home and like say you got onto the celery juice craze or any kind of juicing that you're doing, if you're using that juicer, you want to juice everything you're going to drink that moment. Then like try to not juice a bunch of juice and keep it in your fridge because the nutrient density, it oxidizes like within an hour. So really you want to make the juice and drink it right away. It's also going to be more room temperature. You don't want your juice to be ice cold, even in the summertime when you're drinking it. I try to convince my clients, like pull your juice out, pour it into another glass, let it warm up a little bit. So if you're going to make juice at home, make the juice, drink it right away. If for some reason you've got a little extra that you want to save for later, if you've got a jar that you're going to put it in, fill it literally all the way to the top, like practically even overflowing, and then slide your lid on to eliminate all the oxygen that you can. And that's going to give you a little bit more life out of it. So those are the kind of the basics of that piece. The other thing is putting any kind of citrus, so lemon and lime specifically, and a Granny Smith apple. So Granny Smith apples are going to be the lowest in sugar of your apple options. So putting a little bit of apple and citrus in there is going to help to maintain the integrity of the juice. And then the last thing is like thinking about recipe. I kind of think of juices as like a salad dressing. So when you make a salad dressing, you have your acid, your sweet, your, whatever ingredients. So when you do a juice, you always want to make sure you have something green in there, like start with a big leafy bunch of green something. Also pay attention to your dosha, because if you're like super vata, you're going to want more hearty beets, carrots, things like that. If you're more kapha, you're going to want more greens, more bitter in there. So you kind of get your main thing, either the beets or the greens, and then a little bit of sweetness. So a tiny bit of apple in there or a little bit of orange, but not a lot. And then a little bit of citrus in there and you're good to go. So I just think those three ingredients are a really nice place to start. If you want to experiment with some ginger in there, you can start throwing things in, but I just say keep it simple to start out with. A baseline vegetable, either greens or roots, something a little bit sweet in there to help kind of balance that out, and then a citrus of some sort. I will say you want something in there that's going to give you more liquid. So like the cucumbers and the celeries are going to give you a little bit more liquid in there. The greens aren't going to give you much liquid. It'll be very strong. So this time of year, like a cucumber, kale, lemon juice would be awesome. And you might not even need the apple if you have a bunch of cucumber in there.
Great. That sounds super tasty. Where can people find you online?
Well, I'm online at greenheartjuice.com. I'm also active on Instagram and Facebook. Unfortunately, I only deliver and service to like the Brevard, Asheville, Hendersonville area. Unfortunately, I don't ship, but feel free to reach out to me. Even if you don't live local and you have questions about any of the things we talked about, I'd gladly share what I know.
Great. Yeah, Katie has really beautiful pictures too. I always really enjoy your pictures.
We do have good pictures.
You can enjoy her pictures, and she posts beautiful things on Instagram. So follow her, Green Heart Juice, Instagram, Facebook, and get some great ideas and inspirational photos. So thank you so much, Katie. Can you believe a half an hour is already over? It's great to get this opportunity to talk with you and get to hear more about how your journey with yoga and Ayurveda have influenced you as an entrepreneur and may you continue to flourish and prosper in
Thank
your
you.
endeavors.
It's been a joy. Yeah, the whole journey has been wonderful. Just learning and growing, all of it.
Yeah,
Thanks, Penny.
awesome. Well, namaste. I'll be seeing you soon.
Namaste. Bye, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Bye.